Welcome to the newest episode of Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. I'm your host, Jason Fraley, picking the brains of the top filmmakers, musicians, and artists of our time. Kix headlines the M3 Rock Festival tonight to officially reopen Merriweather Post Pavilion. I spoke with Brian Damage Forsythe about the band's humble beginnings in Frederick, Maryland.
Yeah, I grew up in Frederick. I ended up in Hagerstown later on after the band formed.
Gotcha. And where about in Frederick did you live?
Well, I started out back in the '60s, up near Braddock Heights, and then we ended up in Feegyville for a year or so, and then finally settled up in like the Rocky Springs area.
Remind us how you guys actually formed in Hagerstown. How did you meet Steve Whiteman and Donnie Purnell and the rest of them?
Well, it was kind of like a long, drawn-out process, but it started out in Frederick. I ran into Ronnie because I knew Ronnie through other bands. I used to go see his bands play, and we didn't go to the same high school, but I knew of him, and I'd met him a few times. So I heard that he was leaving his band at that time, so I was trying out for his band to take his place. And one night in Frederick at a 7-Eleven, I ran into him, and he told me about this band that him and Donnie Purnell were putting together, and he talked me out of joining his old band. He goes, "Oh, you don't want to play with those guys. They never rehearse and they never learn any new songs." So that's sort of how it started. You know, Ronnie just approached me out of the blue like that, which was really cool. And then we got together at my parents' house there in Frederick first. It was just Ronnie, Donnie, me, and then another Donnie Spence on drums. And we ended up going through a few different singers over the next couple years. We finally got Steve around 79. And then soon after Steve, we replaced our original drummer with Jimmy. So you know, it took a while. So it wasn't until the end of '79 until we had the full lineup. Then by that point, we ended up relocating up into, by the time we got Steve, we were in Hagerstown. So that's how we ended up there.
Gotcha. So you said that was around like 79, and then Atlantic signed you in like, I think it was 81 for the self-titled debut album, Kix.
Yeah.
How'd that deal come about? You know, you're playing in Hagerstown. A lot of people wouldn't think you could, land a record deal in freaking Hagerstown.
Well, we were playing other places besides Hagerstown. I mean, we actually got the A&R guy from Atlantic came down to a club in Waldorf, this place called the Stardust. But the way we got that was we hooked up with Face Dancer's manager, this band Face Dancer from Baltimore that had a record out on Capitol. So we thought, well, we'll get their manager, that way he can get us a record deal. And sure enough, he did. And the way he did it was he would take these, our sound man would record the show every night from a cassette deck on the soundboard. He would just stick a cassette tape in and record the show. And our manager started taking those tapes, and he would just stick them in an envelope and send them off to different record companies. And Atlantic was the first one that, actually the only one that responded, and they sent the guy down to Waldorf to see us live. And like within like a week or two, we were doing a showcase up in New York City for the label.
Gotcha. All right, so you had your debut album. How do you think you guys evolved from that to, your second one was Cool Kids, and then Midnight Dynamite, your third, was probably the one that you really, really blew up in. But how important do you think that period was of you guys sort of, finding yourselves until you finally really exploded there with Dynamite?
Yeah, it was kind of an evolution, because early, like 1980, because most of the songs on the first record were written, well, here's a little tidbit. When Ronnie, Donnie, me, and the original drummer got together for the first time, it was December 1977 in my parents' basement. The very first song we worked on and played together was Atomic Bombs. So, all those songs for the first record were written from like that point through 1980. And, at that time during the music scene, it was like punk rock and new wave, and there was some rock bands too. There was like Cheap Trick and some, Aerosmith was still around, but that was the influence back then on that record. So each record was influenced by just a little further into the 80s, and plus, by the time we got to Midnight Dynamite, Donnie's songwriting was maturing. He was just getting better every time. Every album got better and better, and so by the time we hit that, it was almost like we sort of found our identity. I think the first two records we were kind of fishing around trying to find it.
Yeah, for sure. And then, of course, I mean, everyone remembers the big power ballad, Don't Close Your Eyes. That was on the fourth one, right? That was Blow My Fuse.
Yeah.
You had hits before that and everything, but I feel like that's the one you'll still hear on, if they do those, best power ballad collections of the 80s, you'll hear that one sometimes. What do you remember where you were when you first heard that thing on the radio, or just your general reaction of seeing that song blow up?
Well, yeah, I don't remember where I was when I heard it, but I know that we were kind of at the end of the cycle. Like we'd already put out what was it, Cold Blood, Get It While It's Hot, and Blow My Fuse videos off of that record, and the record company was actually already done with it and had told us that it was time to move on and start thinking of the next record. And we were on the Tesla Great White tour at that point. It was right at the end. We were going to come off the road and then start working on another record. And their manager, Great White's manager, Alan Niven, who was also Guns N' Roses manager at the time, heard us playing that song every night. And after one of the shows, he comes up. Our manager was there that night too, and he goes, "How come that's not a single?" And our manager said, "Well, the record company said they're not putting any more money into this record. It's time to do another record." And Alan Niven said, "Well, they'd be crazy not to release that." And I guess our manager had already asked them, and they turned it down. So Alan Niven says, "You mind if I ask them?" And he had, at that time, Guns N' Roses was huge. So he actually called Atlantic and told them they'd be insane to not release that song. And so they took his advice and they released it. And I remember when it started to build, it was because we had released a bunch of different songs by that point, and they'd always come out and they do okay, but it never like took off. And this one started taking off, and it was like I couldn't believe like the list of radio stations that it was being added to. It was really cool to watch that happen. And we got all the way to number 11. Not quite top 10, but still, I mean, that is so cool.
That's so cool. And thanks for that story. I didn't realize that, it was sort of an afterthought of, like the fourth or fifth single you would even put out on that. That's a cool story.
Well, that also goes to show you that, half the time the record company has no clue. They're just sort of, I don't know what they're thinking.
Well, you know what? If it was a science, every song would be a hit, So there's a bit of weird organic magic to it, I guess.
Yeah.
So that, you close out the 80s on a bang with that. And then when you're moving into the 90s, you got, you did Hotwire. And then I feel like I remember there was like a live album. Didn't you record it in College Park, my alma mater, University of Maryland?
Yeah, it was College Park.
Memories of that show down there? Was it at Cole Fieldhouse or where'd you play it?
Yeah, that's where it was. Yeah, I remember that very clearly. We actually shot 2 videos before the show, like after sound check. We did the video for Hotwire and a video for Rock and Roll Overdose. And then we had to do a concert after that. And I don't know if you've ever experienced like somebody shooting a video, but it's like take after take after take after take. So I mean, by the time we got done doing 2 videos, I know myself personally, I was like completely worn out, and then I had to come out and do a show. So it was a little bit rough. And I think we had a 2-week break right before that, and that was like the longest break we'd had in several years. So, not only were we worn out from doing those videos, but we also weren't like we were sort of out of the routine of playing like every single week. So, we had to sort of, I don't know, I felt like it was a little sloppy, but it came off. It came off pretty well on the record.
Well, I mean, yeah, we could go through all of your all your albums and concerts, but I guess the main thing, at least in recent years, locally before COVID hit, Kix was a mainstay at Merriweather at that M3 Rock Festival they did every year. Just memories of why that became such an annual deal for you all.
Um, well, for one thing, it's kind of like the hometown town crowd. When we first started, I think they were only doing. They didn't have Fridays yet. I don't think when it first started, or if they did, I don't remember. We were just sort of lumped in, with all the other bands, and then we were doing so well. Like we would go on, and the place would just be like everybody would flood in there, and then when we got done, and the next band goes on, people would start leaving, and I think they noticed that, and so they ended up putting us on Friday, like headlining the Friday night slot from then on. So we've been doing it pretty much, I think, from the beginning. We've been doing that every year.
Yeah, I mean, I remember every time they put out the headliners there, you guys are always there. So I mean, it's definitely kept you guys, the name Kix around locally for a while now. Cool. Well, I mean, that sort of brings us to present day. How much has COVID sort of sidelined your tour dates?
Well, yeah, I mean, we pretty much stopped playing mid-March, and we hadn't, like, our calendar was full before all this stuff happened, and little by little, first March and April, all those shows got shoved into June and July, and beyond. And then the closer we get to each one of these months, the shows kept getting pushed and pushed and pushed. We did a private event in July, and then we did Labor Day weekend. We did a outdoor show. Then we did a small club outside of Baltimore at one point.
Well, it'll be nice to see you guys back out there. I'm sure the muscle memory is still there.
Yeah.
I know you said you're living in Nashville now. How cool is it though, whenever you get a Frederick gig pop up and you say, no way, that's where I grew up, but how satisfying is that for you? Get some of the hometown crowd to come out, drive up in their cars and watch the show at Frederick.
It's really cool. I mean, we don't actually play Frederick that often because there's not really anywhere to play. I mean, most of the time we play Maryland, it's like, closest to Frederick, I think, is Brunswick when we do those shows, but
very, very cool. And I assume at Merriweather, I don't want to spoil the set list entirely, but I assume we'll hear all the hits from over the years.
Yeah, you'll hear, we're trying to mix it up a little. We've sort of, because when we find a good running order for the set list, we stick to it most of the time and just switch out a couple things here and there. But these last few shows we've done, we've flipped the set list inside out. So it's like, the songs aren't where people expect them to be. So, and we've brought back, a couple that we haven't done in a while. So it'll be good.
Awesome, man. Well, we're looking forward to it. Again, everybody, it's Friday night with Kix. Get your tickets now. Thanks so much for joining us, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. And one last thing before we go, I should mention that we're re-releasing Midnight Dynamite.
Cool.
But
so
it's going to be.
Can come hear some of those songs this weekend, and that'll be the perfect way to tee up getting the re-release. Thanks so much. I really do appreciate it. I think this will be a cool interview for especially people that grew up around here and riding around listening to WTOP. When they hear Kix, their ears are going to perk up a little, I think. So thanks so much.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right, take it easy.
All right, bye.
Thanks so much for joining us on Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. Remember to hit the subscribe button and give us a 5-star rating if you like what you hear. We'll see you next time. I wanted to take a second to tell you about an app I really enjoy. Living in the DC area is great, and Podcast DC gathers all of the local shows that I like all in one local app. Health, sports, local news, politics, and so much more. Podcast DC is the new local app with hundreds of DC area podcasts to choose from. I can earn exciting rewards just for listening and share the podcasts I love instantly. Available in the App Store or in Google Play, listen local with Podcast DC.